There is a moment most people never talk about because admitting it feels dangerous. You're trying to learn something, not casually, but seriously. You've committed this time. You've opened the book, the course, the lesson, the video. You sit there, eyes on the material, telling yourself this matters. And yet nothing locks in. You understand the words. You recognize the logic. You can even repeat parts of it back. But deep down, you feel it. The hollow realization that if someone asked you to use this knowledge tomorrow, you would freeze. Not because you didn't study, not because you weren't paying attention, but because the learning never crossed a certain invisible line. Hours later, something unsettling hits you. You learned about the thing, but you did not become capable of the thing. That's when the quiet panic begins. You wonder why learning feels exhausting yet fragile, why information disappears so easily, why progress feels temporary, why you keep starting over, and then you notice something that makes it worse. Someone else, less enthusiastic, less flashy, less motivated, studies the same thing and somehow walks away transformed, not inspired, not excited, just solid, as if the knowledge fused into them. They don't explain it, they don't hype it, they just do. And that's the moment the question forms. Sharp, uncomfortable, unavoidable. What were they taught that you never were? By the time you start asking that question, the damage has already settled in. You don't notice it all at once. It shows up subtly, disguised as normal behavior. You start bookmarking lessons instead of finishing them. You tell yourself you'll revise later. You jump between resources, convinced the next explanation will finally make it click. You feel busy, even productive, but something never quite solidifies. And over time, a quiet belief forms. Maybe learning just isn't permanent. Maybe forgetting is inevitable. Maybe mastery is only for gifted people. So you adapt. You lower your expectations. You accept surface-level understanding. You measure progress by completion, not capability. You finish courses, you close books, you move on. Yet nothing follows you. What's strange is that no one ever tells you something is wrong. In fact, the world rewards you for this behavior. Certificates, grades, check marks, applause for trying, praise for effort. So you assume this is what learning is. But here's the unsettling part, the part you were never shown. This version of learning didn't exist for most of human history. For centuries, people learned under conditions where forgetting wasn't an option. A mistake didn't mean a lower score. It meant hunger, injury, disgrace, or death. Knowledge wasn't something you consumed. It was something you inhabited. And yet, instead of producing traumatized or rigid people, these systems produced individuals with frightening levels of calm competence. People who didn't panic under pressure. People who didn't need reminders. People who didn't revise. They simply knew. By the time you start feeling frustrated with how fragile your learning feels, you're already living with the effect, without ever seeing the cause. Because the cause wasn't your attention span. It wasn't your intelligence. It wasn't your discipline. It was the silent removal of a learning structure so old, so embedded and so effective that once it disappeared, no one noticed what was missing, only that something felt off. And to understand what that structure was, you first have to confront an uncomfortable truth. You were taught to understand. They were taught to endure. And that difference explains everything that comes next. To understand what was taken from you, you have to look closely at what replaced it. Learning became comfortable. Not easy, comfortable. You were encouraged to enjoy the process, to feel engaged, to stay motivated. Lessons were broken into digestible pieces. Difficult parts were softened. Confusion was treated like a problem to be fixed immediately, not a stage to be endured. If something felt hard, the system adjusted. If something felt boring, it was simplified. If something felt frustrating, you were told to switch approaches. And slowly, without ever being stated outright, a rule was implanted in your mind. If learning feels uncomfortable, something is wrong. At first, that sounds reasonable, even humane. But watch what happens over time. You begin to associate struggle with failure, repetition with inefficiency, slowness with incompetence. You stop trusting the process the moment it stops feeling good, so you skim instead of reread. You move on instead of staying. You chase clarity instead of depth. And every time you do, the learning remains shallow, not because you didn't try, but because you were trained to escape the very sensations that produce permanence. Here's where the tension begins to tighten. In traditional Japanese learning environments, discomfort was not avoided. It was expected. Silence was long, movements were repetitive, progress was invisible. A student could practice the same motion for weeks without feedback. Not because the teacher didn't care, but because correction too early would interrupt something more important: internal calibration. The learner was expected to notice, to feel, to adjust without reassurance. Imagine what that does to the mind. No dopamine hits, no constant validation, no sense of "I'm doing great," just effort, presence, repetition. And here's the unsettling realization that begins to form. Modern learning trains you to seek reassurance. Japanese learning trained people to tolerate uncertainty. One creates dependence, the other creates resilience. And slowly, quietly, you begin to see why one system produces people who panic when they forget, while the other produces people who don't forget at all. But we're still only circling the edges, because embedded inside this approach is something even more disturbing: a belief about human nature that modern education avoids completely. There's a strange pattern that appears once you start looking closely at how traditional Japanese learning worked. At first, it feels irrational. A calligraphy student practices the same single character for months. Not the alphabet, not words. One character, over and over. The ink dries, the paper stacks grow, most of it is discarded. Why? A martial arts student bows before entering the training space every time without exception, even when alone, even when exhausted. Why? A tea ceremony apprentice spends years learning how to walk, how to sit, how to place a bowl, long before learning how to prepare the tea itself. Why? None of this is explained at the beginning. In fact, explanation is often deliberately withheld, and that's the first breadcrumb. In Japanese pedagogy, explanation was considered dangerous when given too early. Words could short-circuit learning. Understanding could become a substitute for embodiment. Another breadcrumb. Mistakes were rarely corrected immediately. A teacher might watch silently as a student repeated the same error again and again. Not because the teacher didn't notice, but because noticing for the student would rob them of something crucial. Another detail, easy to miss. Progress was not measured in outcomes. It was measured in posture, attention, and consistency. A student could be praised not for improvement, but for how they stood, how they entered the room, how they handled tools, how they repeated the same task without complaint. And here's the micro-mystery hiding underneath all of this. Why would a culture care more about how someone practices than what they produce? Why invest so much time before allowing visible results? Why delay competence in favor of something slower, quieter, and harder to quantify? These questions hang in the air for a reason. Because once you see the answer, your entire relationship with learning begins to fracture. In a way that's uncomfortable, but irreversible. Here's the twist most people never expect. The 600-year-old Japanese learning secret isn't about technique, discipline, or even knowledge. It's about the learner themselves, about shaping the mind to withstand the weight of learning before any skill is ever acquired. Modern education teaches you to chase understanding, to feel clever, to experience small wins. You are rewarded for feeling progress. And when that feeling fades, so does your effort. You've been trained to rely on external gratification. The Japanese system flips that upside down. It teaches this uncomfortable truth. The student who depends on comfort will never master anything. You begin to see that every repetition, every invisible correction, every silent observation is a mirror held up to your character. Not your skill, not your knowledge, not even your intelligence, your character. And that's the uncomfortable, almost dark revelation. All this time, your struggles with focus, consistency, or mastering a subject weren't signs of laziness. They were signs that your mind had never been trained to exist without emotional safety nets. Modern learning conditions you to avoid discomfort. Japanese learning conditions you to endure it. And here's the moment that hits hardest. You realize that your failures were never about what you tried to learn. They were about who you had been taught to be while learning. This reframes everything. The gaps, the frustrations, the endless chasing of motivation, all of it is a symptom, not the disease. And that's why this secret has survived 600 years. Because it doesn't just teach technique. It teaches how to exist when everything inside you screams to quit. Now the psychological tension begins to rise. The lesson isn't abstract anymore, it presses on you. It asks, if learning had no comfort, no feedback, no reassurance, would you still persist? Would you still rise every morning to do the work? Would you still repeat the same motion 1,000 times until it became part of you? Most people, and perhaps even you'd, recoil at the thought. Because the truth is uncomfortable. It reveals how fragile our modern brains have become, how dependent we are on feeling good to act, how rare it is to truly internalize learning. And that's exactly where the Japanese secret begins to show its real power. It bypasses motivation entirely. It doesn't wait for desire. It doesn't rely on passion. It shapes the learner from the inside out, forging consistency, patience, and resilience before a single skill is mastered. The moment you understand this, the emotional weight intensifies. You can feel it in your chest, a mixture of awe and dread. Because if this secret is real, everything you were taught about learning is incomplete, even misleading. The question lingers. Could you have survived 600 years of this system? Now let's step deeper into the subtle machinery of this 600-year-old learning secret. The tension grows because this isn't just about memorizing facts or mastering a skill. It's about training your mind to endure a process that modern life has sanitized. Imagine this. You sit down to study and there's no cheering voice telling you you're doing well. No flashy app celebrating your streak, no instant feedback. Just the task, the material, the silence, the discipline to continue, and at first, it feels unbearable. Your brain rebels. Every fiber of your being resists. Thoughts flood in. This is pointless. I don't understand. I'm not getting anywhere. You're tired. You're impatient. You want comfort. You want an escape. And that's precisely the moment the Japanese learning secret targets. It trains you to stay in the tension, not to avoid it, not to escape it, not to feel good about it, to exist within it, to observe discomfort without flinching, to repeat the task, to absorb the process, to endure. Breadcrumb 1. A student may practice calligraphy for hours without a single word of praise. Every stroke scrutinized silently by a master. Every mistake noticed, every correction repeated endlessly. No shortcuts, no motivation-driven bursts of "I feel like it." Only the raw loop of repetition. Breadcrumb 2. In martial arts, a pupil may execute a single stance hundreds of times, even while exhausted, even while the mind screams to stop. No applause, no certificates, no flashy progress. Only the work, only the posture, only the commitment. Breadcrumb 3. Centuries ago, monks would copy texts in near-dark temples, every letter precise, every line deliberate, for days, weeks, months, often with no recognition whatsoever. The reward wasn't emotional, it was existence itself being trained in endurance. And here's where the psychological tension tightens. You realize how completely alien this is to modern life. Modern culture teaches results first, comfort first, self-esteem first. This system flips that. Process first, discomfort first, identity first. Each act of silent, repeated practice builds something invisible. Patience, resilience, focus, the ability to act when nothing feels easy. Every modern shortcut, every quick hack, every motivational pep talk, all of it becomes a crutch. And the more you rely on crutches, the weaker you become when they disappear. Breadcrumb 4. The Japanese system trains people to outlast themselves. To move forward even when the world offers no applause, no instant gratification, no reassurance. This is where your mind begins to tighten with unease. Because you start to see the implication. What you thought were small failures. Skipping study sessions, waiting for inspiration, quitting when it gets hard, are symptoms of a mind conditioned for comfort, not endurance. Breadcrumb 5. The fear creeps in. You ask yourself, could I really survive in a system that expects this level of consistency, this level of internal discipline, this level of self-accountability without external crutches? The answer is uncomfortable. Probably not. At least not yet. And that's exactly why this secret is so powerful. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't make you feel good. It exposes your weakness. But only so it can rebuild you from the inside out. The tension is rising now because it's personal. You are no longer watching a story about someone else. You are seeing a mirror. Your own dependence on comfort, your own surrender to fleeting motivation, your own fragility under challenge. And here's the loop that tightens it even further. The longer you resist discomfort, the stronger you become. The longer you endure, the less your mind craves external validation. The longer you practice without reward, the more your identity begins to internalize action itself. Every failure, every moment you want to quit, every craving for ease, it's all fuel for transformation. By now, the tension has a weight. It is quiet, intimate, almost suffocating. You feel it pressing in. The realization dawns. This secret is not about learning fast. It's not about clever strategies. It's about learning to endure. Every skill, every mastery, every achievement flows from the capacity to continue when nothing else supports you. And here is the uncomfortable question whispered into the rising tension. If you can't endure discomfort now, how can you expect to master anything in the future? This is the moment where the truth hits quietly, almost like a shadow brushing across your chest. You realize that your struggles with learning, the forgetfulness, the shallow understanding, the constant need for motivation, were never really about your ability. They were about what you had been trained to expect from learning. Modern learning teaches you to seek excitement, reward, and affirmation. It conditions you to depend on feeling good in order to act. And when the feeling fades, so does your effort. The Japanese system teaches something far more brutal. Endurance without reward, mastery without cheer, identity forged in silence. It asks you to endure frustration until it becomes familiar. It asks you to repeat tasks until your body understands what your mind cannot yet grasp. It asks you to sit in discomfort until your nervous system itself transforms. You begin to see why this system lasts centuries. Its power isn't in speed, flash, or innovation. Its power is in embedding knowledge so deeply that it cannot be lost. Skills are no longer learned, they are inhabited. And suddenly, your past failures make sense. You weren't lazy, You weren't incapable, you weren't unlucky. You were using the wrong architecture. The learning methods you were taught were designed to produce short-term comfort, not long-term competence. The uncomfortable, almost thrilling truth settles in. If you want mastery, you must embrace discomfort. You must stop chasing shortcuts. You must repeat, endure, and absorb, even when it feels like nothing is happening. This is why the Japanese secret works. Because learning is not about consuming knowledge. It is about becoming someone who can carry knowledge naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. The weight of this realization is strange. It humbles you. It terrifies you. It challenges everything you thought about yourself and your abilities. And yet, it is liberating. Because once you understand this, you finally see a path forward. A path that doesn't rely on luck, talent, or fleeting motivation. A path built entirely on your capacity to endure and transform. 8. Quiet landing, reflective outro. Now sit with it for a moment. The secret isn't flashy. It doesn't come with applause, medals, or instant gratification. It doesn't make you feel clever, motivated, or inspired in the way modern learning promises. It is quiet. It is persistent. It is almost invisible. The 600-year-old Japanese learning secret you've been tracing through this story is not a technique. It is a shift in identity. It is the slow, deliberate understanding that your actions, repeated over time, define who you become. Not your mood, not your talent, not your fleeting energy. The process is longer. The work is harder. The patience is greater. But the result is profound. The lessons settle in like a calm tide. Mastery is a life, not a moment. Knowledge is inhabited, not simply acquired. Discomfort is the teacher, repetition is the curriculum, endurance is the reward. Motivation is optional. Consistency is inevitable. Your identity is the engine. Your actions are the fuel. And in that understanding, something subtle but life-changing occurs. You are freed. Freed from the tyranny of waiting for the right mood. Freed from the guilt of incomplete learning. Freed from the illusion that speed, convenience, or immediate reward define competence. Freed finally to become someone who embodies knowledge, skill, and mastery without needing external permission. Every small act from here forward, the repetition, the practice, the patience, is no longer a chore. It is the forging of yourself. It is the quiet rhythm of growth. And over months, years, decades, it compounds silently into mastery that is virtually unshakable. The Japanese knew this centuries ago. You are only now discovering it. And with that realization comes a strange, still clarity. The way forward is no longer frantic, no longer dependent on sparks, excitement, or praise. It is steady. It is deliberate. It is inevitable. One action at a time. One repetition at a time, one day at a time. That is the secret you were never taught. And now you can start today. Start with one small repeated action. Do it even if you feel nothing. Do it even if the outcome seems meaningless. Let it build your identity. Let it forge your mastery. Step into the rhythm of consistency. And discover the 600-year-old Japanese learning secret for yourself.